Hi math students, this is our introduction video for our lesson on the quadratic formula. For the first part, I want to talk about why we need a quadratic formula. We are going to learn two different ways you can solve quadratic equations. The first way you've already learned. You can solve quadratic equations by factoring. So that's what we've been working on in the past lessons. We've learned for equations like this, you can factor the quadratic. And to do that, we look at the last number, think about what pair of numbers multiply to give us 25 and combine to give us a positive 10. That's not too hard. It's going to be a 5 and a 5, and then go from there to solve. The problem is, sometimes you have quadratic equations like this one here that you can't factor. There are no two numbers that multiply to give you 25 and combine to give us 9. So we can't solve by factoring. This is when you would want to solve by using the quadratic formula. The quadratic formula will work for every equation. This first one that we can solve by factoring, and this one here you can't solve by factoring. I think factoring is a good thing to do first because solving by factoring, once you factor, it does not take that long. The quadratic formula is going to take a little longer though, because this is what the formula looks like. It says to find out what x equals, you're going to do negative b plus or minus, we'll talk about this symbol when we get to an example, plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times a times c, all of that divided by 2a. The a, b, and c in this formula are coming from that quadratic form, ax squared plus bx plus c that we've seen in earlier lessons. This is a formula, so it will be the same for every equation, but it does take a little longer to use. I have an equation below that we'll do as an example to see how you can use this formula. So down here, we are going to solve the equation 2b squared minus 11b plus 4 equals 10. In order to solve this equation, whether you are solving by factoring or by quadratic formula, that first step is set the equation equal to 0. So we can do that by subtracting 10 on both sides to get our 0 over there. And that gives us the equation 2b squared minus 11b. 4 minus 10 is negative 6. And it is equal to 0 now. Now if you tried to go through these steps and you were having a hard time factoring, then you could try the quadratic formula. The quadratic formula starts by identifying a, b, and c. I'm always a fan of writing them out. That's a good way to make sure you pay attention to the signs. A is going to be our 2 in front of b squared. B is going to be the negative 11 in front of b. And then c is the constant, the number by itself, which is negative 6. After you do that, then you're going to substitute into the formula. So remember the formula is x equals negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac, all divided by 2a. When we substitute, remember that means you take out the letter and you put in the number. So for example, a is the number 2. It means here I have the letter a, I'm going to replace that with the number 2. And so it would say 4 times 2 there. I also have a down here, and so that's going to become 2 times 2. And then we can do the same thing with these other numbers. I'm going to keep everything color-coded. So my b, my negative 11, that means right here I need to do negative 11 squared. And then here, because it's negative b, it should say negative 11. You can write that negative 11, or you can just say negative and negative makes positive. And then our c is the number negative 6. So for that last step, it's going to say 4 times 2 times negative 6. I did this jumping around a little bit. Normally I would just write negative 11 plus or minus square root of negative 11 squared minus 4 times 2 times negative 6 all over 2a. But I want you to notice everything in black will always be there when you substitute, even if we change the equation. The parts we are changing are the A, B, and the C. After this, to get our answer, we just need to solve this big, crazy math equation. And so my advice is always start with the square root part. So I'm going to just copy down that x equals, we have a positive 11 now, the plus or minus sign, and I'm really just focusing on the square root part. So 11 squared, remember 11 squared is 11 times 11. Negative 11 squared would be negative 11 times negative 11, and that's going to be a positive 121. And then our minus 4 times 2 times negative 6. Well, negative 4 times 2 is negative 8, and negative 8 times negative 6 is positive 48. You can do that in 2 steps, or you can do it all together. 4 times 2 times negative 6. And then for our final part, divided by, we can go ahead and do this. That 2 times 2 right there is going to be 4. So I've got in color some of the math steps we did first. We said we're really focusing on the square root, so we're going to keep working on solving that. That'll be 11 plus or minus the square root of 121 plus 48 is 169, and then divided by 4. We said we really want to work on that square root, so there's one more thing we can do, the square root of 169. Remember, square rooting a number means you're figuring out what number multiplied by itself equals this number. So for example, the square root of 25 is 5 because 5 times 5 is 25. The square root of 169 is 13 because 13 times 13 is 169. And so from this, I'm going to come over here, we get 11 plus or minus the square root of 169 is 13. No more square root because we found the square root, divided by 4. Okay, we've finished the square root, which means we can come to this next part. And this next part has to do with the plus or minus sign. Plus or minus means you are going to write this problem 2 times. One time with plus, one time with minus. So I take this and I write it 2 ways. I write 11 plus 13 divided by 4, and I write 11 minus 13 divided by 4. So the plus or minus sign gives you 2 answers. And again, just write one with plus, one with minus. The final thing we have to do is simplify these fractions. So I can say 11 plus 13, that's 24 divided by 4, that's 6. And 11 minus 13, that's negative 2. And negative 2 divided by 4, that's a fraction. We can simplify our fraction though and say it's the fraction negative 1/2. So our final answer for this problem, I'll put it over here. X is either the number 6 or negative 1/2. Just like when we solve by factoring, you're going to have 2 answers for the equation. The plan for today is to do a lot of practice using this quadratic formula. You have the steps right here in your notes. The big idea, though, is if you can't solve something by factoring, we can use quadratic formula. And so this will be really good for those equations that are harder or impossible to factor. Thanks so much for watching. You're ready for today's lesson.